Well, my name is Tom Quessy, and I'm one of the senior web designers here at LKCS. And today I'm going to be talking about providing an exceptional website user experience. So before we jump into it, I would like to take a second to go over who we are here at LKCS. LKCS is a full-service marketing company. We've been in business since 1961. And we've worked with financial institutions the entire time. We provide a full range of products and services, but today we're going to be focusing on improving websites. In the graphic, you can see a wide range of things that we potentially offer. And if you have some interest in any of those topics, please reach out to myself or any of our sales reps, and we'll be able to help you out. So in this webinar, I'm going to be talking about some topics that we tend to get asked about quite frequently. We'll be delving into user experience, design thinking, and search engine optimization. So this is going to look at some of the overall concepts that you can use when managing your own site. Even on these topics can go pretty deep, so I'll do my best to field any questions after the presentation. And should you have more in-depth or specific questions about how we can have our experts assist you, please don't hesitate to get in contact with us afterwards. So we're going to talk about first what exactly UX is. So if you're not familiar with UX, what that means is it's an acronym for user experience. We're going to be talking about this specifically in how it kind of deals with design when looking at a website. So when we talk about user experience, or UX as it often gets abbreviated, it can be described in a handful of different ways. Like most design principles, it has kind of an overarching meaning, but can vary depending on what type of format you're working in and the designer that's talking to you about it. My personal favorite way to describe it is that UX is the practice of improving a user's experience with a product in a way that makes it easy or pleasing for them to use. The term user experience design is heavily related to terms like user interface design and designing for usability. As I mentioned before, the format matters quite a bit when trying to teach someone about the best practices. So today, we're going to be covering ways to specifically improve the user experience in regards to a website. So what is user-focused design? So let's begin by talking about let's begin about talking about where we should start with our user experience design. And the first place that I like to begin is knowing what our goals are. To reach the results that we desire, we need to understand exactly what we aim for our users to achieve on the website. And possibly more importantly, what the user is expecting of our site. After we've done that, we're going to start working on creating a visual hierarchy. This is a type of strategy where we use the information that we've gathered to rank our website's needs. Then we use these decisions to inform the importance of the elements within the design. Next is something that always needs to be at the forefront of your mind when working in UX design, and it's constantly asking ourselves, what's the next step I want the user to take? And then asking, how can I help them make it as easy as possible? The last thing we're going to look at, and possibly the most important, is to track and test your website. Tracking data and testing your site is one of the best ways to keep on top of this sort of thing. It goes beyond just like best practices and how those update with the times. It's a great way to kind of keep an eye for constant improvement, and then also look out for kind of like proofreading and proofing the problems with your website. And then finding new ways to experiment with features can really lead to growth, especially if you're able to focus your attention to things that coincide with those goals that we're going to set out. So let's step into discovering our main goals. So this is done by identifying, to the best of our ability, how our goals may overlap with the user's goals. So first, we're going to clearly lay out the main action that we want our users to take on our site. There will usually be quite a few, but just for now, write out the main ones that you can think of. And these could be things like becoming a member, or filling out an application, or even signing up for a newsletter, or any other sort of action that's really important to you. Next, we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to think about it from our user's perspective. What are the most common things that they wish to do when accessing our site? There may be some overlap in these sets of goals, which is a very good thing. And there also may be some goals of theirs that could contradict some of the things that you outlined as your own goals. For example, most financial institutions run into an area where a common top goal of many of your users is that they want to simply log onto the website and go straight to online banking. This can be frustrating because coming in with this as their main goal really doesn't flow with many of the other things that we set up as our goals. So these sorts of disagreements between our goals and their goals are very normal. And in the midst of this conflict is where we can start making some of our most important design decisions. We need to take these ideas and design with empathy for the user. We absolutely need to find compromises and solutions that benefit both us, if we want to get them to apply or immediately get drawn in by maybe a promotion that we're having, and them, who maybe only stopped in to log into online banking quickly and check some of their account information. So this sort of research and critical thinking needs to go forward and educate the decisions that you make throughout your design. Some of the best decisions and features will often come from these compromises, and when you meet both the objectives of you and your audience, that's where you really start to turn these conflicts into strengths, which leads into our next topic. Once the goals are clear, start setting a hierarchy. Thought and research that we put into our goals needs to identify important elements that will be included as we go forward. So when I say set a hierarchy, what we're going to be doing is kind of ranking these goals in order of what is most important to least important. The hierarchy we create is going to be a guideline going forward, and it's kind of going to be this educated way that we can figure out what the top priorities are and then judge the design by this. So it's a really good way to kind of take these concepts and use them as a platform to critique what we make going forward. And doing this should create a site that guides the user throughout your content easily. And this is something that kind of sits at the forefront of user experience design, is making something very easy for your user to use. Now that we know the things that we want and we know where we rank them in importance, it's important to start pulling it all together. One of the main kind of points of user experience is to use design thinking to make the journey easy and elegant from the very start to the very end. The user should always be ushered into the available options for the next step, and not only that, but it needs to be intuitive to anyone who's using it even for the first time. Navigation is a great place to start. So we're going to begin by drawing out a sitemap for yourself. This is going to be a diagram that will lay out where and what pages exist on your site. It's important to know this going forward, and be willing to make edits and decisions about maybe what needs to be trimmed out or what you absolutely need for your user. And your goals can help you point towards those pages that are the most important. You don't need or want to throw too much clutter on your site. Keep it simple, use clear language, keep the goals that you worked out in mind. If possible, do some user testing. User testing is probably the truest way to get feedback on the user experience after it's been built. Always rely on this sort of kind of concrete data more than just the gut feelings you have as you're building it. This sort of testing isn't always available. I know sometimes being able to poll people and find out what they think about your site is not always easy to put together, but it's valuable when you're able to do it. And make sure to keep your eye on any feedback that might come through channels like contact forms or phone calls that you might get. It's not always wise to immediately make any changes due to the opinion of one or two people, unless it's an obvious mistake. But if you start to see a trend of feedback about certain elements, then you should definitely take heed and think about making changes. So one thing that's very important with user experience is to always be thinking about what the user will want to do. During this, you're going to be asking those questions of what's the next step I want the user to take and how can I help to make it as easy as possible. It's a boon to your UX design to commit to putting yourselves in the shoes of the user. Go to great lengths to design with empathy. Given the large differences that you'll have from user to user, this can be a daunting task, I know. But some advice I have here is to try not to just make guesses as to what your users are like. Like I mentioned in the last slide, whenever possible, collect and use real data and then have that inform your decisions. This can help you to create example profiles for your more common user, and that can sometimes help provide kind of helpful insights in itself. Just taking the time to think about who is using your website and what situation they're in and what their kind of thoughts or goals going into it might be. Content should always lead users to your main goals, and it also needs to provide any explanations throughout if needed. Always have your content culminate into the next action. That means that you have, you'll always have some type of way to access a form, a phone number, send in an email, fill out an application, whatever the next step might be. This needs to be available in as many ways possible throughout that content. And if you can, you might even be able to provide more than one of these options. Most of the time, different people are going to be more enticed by sending an email rather than calling in, or someone might want to speak to someone over the phone. So it's good to kind of promote more than one avenue towards the goals. Lastly, in our kind of talk about user experience, I want to talk about continued testing and vigilance. Web design is a practice where the rules seem to constantly change and update, and what might be considered the best practices today may be different by tomorrow. So after you get a site design approved and see it launch, sadly, that's not where the process should end. It's kind of like a garden that takes some constant work where you want to keep tending to it and keep making it better and better. There needs to be an effort put forth to maintain and grow that exceptional user experience. This is going to be done by testing it in different ways. There are tools and services that can help you collect data and try to identify those pain points that your users might experience while browsing your site. It's rare for anything to be perfect on the first try. So even though the user experience might be exceptional, it's a must to keep searching for areas to improve. A lot of good can also be done by running experiments on your site, making changes to how things are done to see if it improves important statistics. By making changes, and even if they're slight or small, maybe you enlarge a banner or you reduce the amount of advertising you're doing on the site or whatever it might be. Running these kind of smaller experiments and then tracking that data over time, it can provide important insights on how to better achieve the goals that you set out for. And also a quick note on experimenting. From personal experience, not all changes that you will try will work. But even when the changes may not solve the problem you had in mind, there are still usually some insights to be gained and used. I find that the failures can usually bring to light options that you might not have thought of at the very start, but you wouldn't have found out without first trying. So we've talked a lot about user experience design for the website, but now we're going to shift over into some more SEO related topics. And just for everybody, when I say SEO, I mean search engine optimization. So the first thing we're going to look at is optimizing page content. One thing is, having a great website really means nothing if people aren't finding it, and that's generally going to start with a search on Google. Content is a big part of search engine rankings. It's how they understand what your web page and site are all about. So write with a purpose. Remember that content should be written for people first, and it should be written to educate your readers or generate leads. So part of it is figuring out exactly what this certain page is doing when you write the content. So what will the topic be? Then, after you decide that, decide if what you're creating is the main piece of content about this specific topic, or if it's something that's just generated to support that piece. Research your keywords. So once you've chosen your topic, you'll need to do keyword research to find what terms people are searching to find information on this chosen subject. So let's say that your topic is a first-time home buyer loan. You may find that people who are looking for it search for a variety of different things. Here you can see I have some examples typed up, like how to apply for first-time home buyer loan, how to qualify for a home loan, first-time buyer, first-time home buyer loan requirements. These are usually the kind of slapdash way that people will type into search engines. So it's good to be realistic with what you're thinking about. And this tells us what you may want to write as articles answering these kind of searches. It's good to optimize for 1 to 3 keywords per page at most. Trying to do more will kind of dilute the focus of that page. And once you've selected your keywords, you're going to want to make sure that you use them to the full effect. You can do this by identifying your primary keyword and using it prominently as your page headline. If you're able to, try to use the keyword as your page URL. And when writing the content, use it throughout it naturally, but kind of avoid overstuffing your page with keywords. If you're saying it every other sentence, that's going to be way too much. You're going to want to shoot for at least 2 times. Highlight it with bold italics when it makes sense to, and always link to relevant content within your website. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about page titles and meta tags. Since you've chosen a keyword for your page, make sure you use it as a page title. This title shows up for users when they do a search, and it serves as your listing's headline. It basically identifies what your page is all about and is a really important part of SEO. Try to make sure it's not more than 70 characters. Include your primary keyword and, if possible, some of your other keywords. And try to uniquely separate your title from others that might be similar. So the example that I use here is your financial institution's name, but something that's specific that gets worked into these kind of things can really make all the difference. You also want your page title to be eye-catching and clear to understand. This is what's going to draw people in to want to click on your website. Meta descriptions will most likely be the content that appears underneath your page title. It's not always guaranteed that it will, and Google did stop considering it a ranking factor years ago, but it still serves to support as the supporting text for that title and to kind of get people interested in clicking through. So make sure it includes your keyword, is engaging, and has a call to action. Great content and design needs to be built with well thought out and modern code. Search engines look at each page's text to code ratio, and they like to see that sites that have more content versus code. This doesn't really give you a license to write content just for the sake of it, but it does give your programmers a chance to review your code to determine what is necessary and what isn't. You can kind of ask yourself, do you have old tracking codes you're not using? Could CSS be moved to a separate style sheet? It's also a big factor when it comes to page speed. Search engines like Google want websites that load fast so that they can deliver a good experience for their users, whether they're on a mobile device, with a bad connection, or even at a home computer. The faster your site loads, the better. We should be shooting for an average of 2 to 3 seconds. You can see how fast it loads by reviewing your Google Analytics account if you have one, and that kind of gives you an average, or you can try free testing tools available on the net. So you probably might wonder how I can improve my site's code. So here I have a list of things that you can have your programmers kind of look into and see if there's changes that can be made to adjust them. So at the top, we have minifying CSS, JavaScript, and HTML, trying to compress and reduce the size of files and images, removing JavaScripts that have to load before anything else does, reducing the amount of times a page may be redirected to another URL, and just improving your server's response time. So structured data is an extra programming feature that you can use to help identify your page content and give it context so that search engines can understand it better. It essentially labels your information in kind of a uniform way that Google, Bing, and other search engines can kind of utilize. Your labels can be used to clearly identify business hours, contact information, details about your financial institution, or what type of financial products your site features. As of this webinar, it's technically not considered a search engine ranking factor, but it can make your listings more visually appealing and stand out from your competitors. So while your page content is boosting your rankings, your structured data can help to make your listings stand out. The easy example of that is in a paragraph snippet. Structured data also makes it easy to return more accurate voice search results because the information is labeled, and it's easy for a device like Alexa or Siri to find and repeat back an answer. Like if you ask what the credit union's hours are today, for example, you could get the answer back pretty easily. As voice commands become more and more commonplace in all of the technology that we use, this is a good idea to keep up on. And that covers the information that I wanted to impart about user experience and SEO basics. Both of these topics have a lot more information and depth when you start to dive deeper in. I hope that after this, you feel that you have an understanding of some of these new topics, if they're new to you, and a starting point to jump into the work. As always, we here at LKCS are here to help you with some of your next projects that you might have in mind. So please get in contact with me or any of our sales reps and we can get that started.